2 years ago. Joining us now, the GOP's 2012 nominee, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Governor, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
You had a tough article in the Washington Post this week in which you really went after President Obama for shrinking our military. In the article, you write this: "The history of the 20th century teaches that power-hungry tyrants ultimately feast on the appeasers." Back in 2012, the president mocked you for that. Take a look.
You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military's changed.
Governor, how do you feel when you listen to that and the president treating you as a somewhat dim bulb?
Well, you know, the president has a very different foreign policy than that's been followed by our country over the last 50 or 60 years. His view is that instead of having a strong American military that's able to keep other nations in check, that we ought to instead put in place a policy based on what he calls common humanity. Well, humanity is not common in its views. What one people call evil and other people call good. The world relies upon, and America must rely upon, a strong military. And by the way, China understands the importance of a Navy. Its Navy will be larger than ours within 7 years. That's the consequence of the president's policies.
In that same presidential debate, Mr. Obama also made fun of your views on Russia. Let's take a look at that.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, you know, the Cold War's been over for 20 years.
Governor, when you look at Ukraine and the decision not to keep U.S. troops in Iraq and the decision not to arm the rebels in Syria from the start, what do you make of the choices that this president has been making, particularly here in the second term?
Well, I think the president is really out of touch with reality when it comes to what's happening in the world. And I don't know why that is. Perhaps it's political philosophy, it's foreign policy views. But look, he looked at Russia and thought that was a friend we should reset relations with. He looked at al-Qaeda and said they're on the run. Just more recently, he looked at ISIS and said, oh, they're just the junior varsity. He looks at Iraq and says, hey, they're strong and able to care for themselves. Look, he is so out of touch with reality that he hasn't taken the kind of action necessary to prevent very bad things from happening. A strong America that stands up for its beliefs is an America that's able to defend itself and to defend our principles around the world. But when America is seen, and the president is seen as being weak, bad people do bad things. And you're seeing that all across the Middle East. You're seeing that as well in other parts of the world, including, of course, Afghanistan, Ukraine. It's a real tragedy.
I want to pick up on another campaign issue, because during the 2012 race, you also accused President Obama of covering up the mishandling of the terror attack in Benghazi. This weekend, Fox has been running a documentary in which two special operators, special security operators, told Bret Baier that they were told repeatedly to stand down and not to go rescue the American diplomats at the U.S. consulate. Here's a clip from that documentary.
All I can talk about is what happened on the ground that night.
To you?
To us, to myself twice, and to Tig once. It happened that night. That happened. We were told to wait and stand down. We were delayed 3 times.
Governor, do you think a Benghazi cover-up is still going on?
Well, I think this raises a lot of questions. I mean, one, why did the administration talk to these people a long time ago? Why were they out there with a story saying that the reason for what happened in Benghazi was because of a video, which these guys said was total baloney? They knew that from the beginning. How come the administration didn't check into that? And number two, who was it that told these guys to stand down? Were they in contact with people higher up, particularly from the United States? What was the reason they were told to stand down when they were ready and able to go in and support the security of our people there in the embassy annex? This goes on and on and on. We try and understand why it is that this administration is unwilling to be transparent. This was a policy they said they would have, which is open transparency, but they've instead not been forthcoming in what's happened there. And that's something which, by the way, doesn't just land at the feet of the president. it lands at the feet of Hillary Clinton as well. She keeps on saying, you know, there's nothing to see here, just move on. Well, people want to understand exactly what happened.
I mentioned at the top of the show the president's 38% approval rating now in the Gallup poll, tying an all-time low. In July, they did a poll of voters asking them if they had 2012 all to do over again, how would they vote? You'll be happy to know this time you won 53% to 44%. Obviously, that doesn't put you in the Oval Office, but the question I have for you, Governor, is this. Do you think Americans are having some buyer's remorse about 2012?
Oh, I think they have some buyer's remorse about President Obama. I'm not sure how they feel about me, but that's kind of irrelevant. The real question is, how's this president doing? And frankly, they recognize the president has not been engaged. The idea that we have a group known as ISIS or ISIL that we've known about for almost a year, where members of Congress have said to the president, prepare for this, get ready for them, make sure they don't make incursions into Iraq. I mean, we fought long and hard to provide security and freedom for those people. And yet the president was, I don't know, too busy on the golf course to pick up the phone and meet with the leaders around the world and to say, what happens if? You know, the Pentagon was going through what-if scenarios, but the president apparently hasn't developed a strategy. I mean, I don't know whether you can't see reality from a fairway, but the president has not seen the reality internationally, and then domestically, we've got, what, 92 million people that have stopped looking for work, that are out of work in this country? It's unacceptable. The American people are struggling, having a hard time. This president's policies, both at home and abroad, are hurting people, and people are responding in the way they review him.
I am sure that a bunch of people watching right now are thinking, gee, where was that guy? Wasn't he making all of those points in 2012? But the fact is, if we're going to look back, and I want to just for a moment at 2012, you also did make your fair share of mistakes, and here are a few of them.
They brought us whole binders full of women. I was a severely conservative Republican governor. I like being able to fire people. There are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government.
The bottom line, among voters who said cares about people like me was the most important candidate quality, among those voters, Obama beat you 81% to 18%. Governor, why do you think it was that so many people saw you as an unfeeling, rich guy, and does that perception still bother you?
Oh, look, I'm much more concerned about what the country is going to be doing going forward. I want to make sure that we have a nominee, and we've got a lot of terrific Republican individuals that are looking at the race. We have a nominee who can win, and we can get the country back on track.
But, sir, you're kind of ducking the question,
and helping the poor.
Did you contribute to this perception that you don't care about average Americans?
Oh, there's no question but that I and my campaign made some mistakes. I think it's going to be a long time before we see a perfect campaign and a perfect candidate. Look, I have weaknesses. I don't get every sentence out perfectly. Sometimes I misspeak. That was a parade of horribles there that makes me cringe. But the reality is that the opposition did a very good job picking up on those mistakes and just beating the heck out of me. And I didn't do as good a job as I wish I would have describing who I am to the American people. But look, that's the past. The future is, how do we make sure that we get a president that spends time running the country, running the government, running the administration in such a way as to help the middle class of this country regain its footing, to help the poor get out of poverty, and to protect our interests around the world. This president's not doing it.
Governor, let me look to the future, because voters seem willing to give you another chance. There was a USA Today poll just a couple of weeks ago of Iowa voters in which you swamped the field there. You had 35%. Huckabee was second with 9%, and the rest of the field trailed after that. And recently you gave an interview, and when asked about running again, you gave a whole lot of reasons why not, but then you also said circumstances can change. Question, what does that mean?
Well, you know, I've spoken on this topic so many times. I don't really have anything new to add, Chris. I'm not running, and I'm not planning on running. I'm going to be supporting our nominee, hopefully a strong individual that's able to take our message to the American people and get this country back on track for the people who need help. And there are a lot of people who do.
But are you making a Sherman-esque commitment, absolutely will not run, if nominated will not serve, or are there circumstances under which you would consider running again?
Chris, I'm not going to add to the story. I've got nothing new for you. I've spoken at this time and time again. I'm not running. I'm not planning on running. And I'm going to be helping the person who takes the banner for us.
Let me ask you about this a different way. In your heart, do you still think that you would make the best president of all the people out there?
Look, there's no question in my mind that I think I'd have been a better president than Barack Obama has been. No question in my mind about that. And there are other good people who I'm sure will be able to lead the country in the future. I wish it were me. Let me tell you, it was a great experience running for president. I loved that. But my time has come. Come and gone. I had that opportunity. I ran. I didn't win. And now it's time for someone else to pick up the baton.
You mentioned Hillary Clinton. Do you think you'd make a better president than Hillary Clinton?
No question about that in my mind. The American people may disagree with me, but look, you've got to get this economy going. You have to have people who understand what it takes to create jobs and to help people come out of poverty, to help the middle class have a better and more prosperous future. You've got to have that understanding. You've also got to have people who've actually run something. The government of the United States is the largest enterprise in the world. You've watched a president who just doesn't understand how to make an administration work, how to interact with Congress, how to get things done. You have to have those things, and I don't think Hillary Clinton has that experience. And I look, for instance, at her record as Secretary of State. Look, her record is Barack Obama's record in foreign policy, and it's a disaster. I mean, the president went to Egypt and said we're going to have this new wonderful relationship with the Muslim world, and now the Middle East is burning. The president won't even call the invasion by Russia into Ukraine an invasion. Look, if you can't speak decisively, you can't be decisive. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are two peas in the same pod, and the American people have tasted that and have said, look, that's not a good taste. It's not right for the American people.
All right, we've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to do your old favorite, the lightning round. Quick questions, quick answers. President Obama now says that he's going to delay action on immigration reform until after the election, he says, because he needs to explain how he is dealing with the question of the unaccompanied minors coming over the border. Here's what he said to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press.
The politics did shift midsummer because of that problem. Right. I want to spend some time, even as we're getting all our ducks in a row for the executive action, I also want to make sure that the public understands why we're doing this, right, why it's the right thing for the American people, why it's the right thing for the American economy.
Briefly, Governor, what's going on there?
Well, he should spend less time on the golf course and more time thinking about ISIS and Ukraine and, in this case, immigration. He should follow the law and work with Congress instead of trying to do things unilaterally. But what's happening, of course, is cynical and political.
Cynical and political in what sense? Putting it off till after the election?
The president is saying, look, I'm going to violate the law after the election when what I do won't have serious electoral consequences. He's basically saying he's going to do something the American people won't like, and he wants to make sure and do it after the midterms when it won't have consequence for him.
And finally, about a minute left, sir. In 2012, you had Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell on your short list of potential running mates. As you well know, he was convicted this week of taking bribes, some even before you were considering him as a running mate to help a businessman. I guess two questions. What does that say about your vetting process? And frankly, did you misjudge Bob McDonnell?
Well, I'm not going to say anything about the vetting process. We communicated to all the individuals that we vetted that would be completely off the record and confidential, and it is. But I can say this with regards to Bob McDonnell, which is I'm very sorry for him and for his family. It's a family tragedy, obviously, and a political tragedy for the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, for the people there, for the people associated with him. I've called him. I've expressed my sympathy. It's a very sad setting, and I wish he and his family the very best in very difficult circumstances.
Governor Romney, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
So, what do you think about Mitt Romney, especially after that interview? Is he the